Alberta planning to return to school, full return for its students this fall. Scenario 1. The education minister says the experience of students will be nearly the same as it was before the pandemic, but there will be changes, including cohorting classes. So meaning the same group together all the time, moving from class to class, same timetable, rearranging classrooms for physical distancing when possible, breaks, drop-offs, pickups, all staggered. And for students who take the bus, their seating will be assigned. Masks will not be mandatory for students or teachers. All of the rules are part of what the officials describe as I mentioned, scenario 1. But there are 2 other scenarios they can pivot to, they say, if they determine the rules need to be reassessed and changed.
We are determined to do everything that we can possibly do to safely return students to class. However, we will continue to adjust protocols as required on the advice of our Chief Medical Officer of Health and in consultation with the education system.
Now, not
we are
everyone...
confident that our plan will work.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut the minister off there. We are confident that our plan will work, is what she said at the end. Now, not everyone else is sharing in that confidence. The president of the Alberta Teachers Association says there are outstanding safety concerns. Educators were not properly consulted. And that is the position of the association. Let's bring you some individual reaction to this. Rejwa Shibli is a high school teacher in Edmonton. She's been teaching chemistry for 8 years. She's going to be teaching math as well come September, and she's in Edmonton this morning. Rejwa, welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you on our program this morning.
Thank you.
You were listening there this morning, as you were yesterday, I'm sure, to the education minister. What's your reaction overall, Rejwa, to the plan from the province to go ahead full steam with full reopening in the fall?
I have huge concerns with the lack of safety parameters that are being provided. They are referencing when they talked about their evidence that they use, so different governments in Europe, as well as the Calgary Education Board that was doing the summer school, that was running summer school in a controlled environment with classroom size restrictions, PPE provided, staggered bells, as well as different points of entry and exits. That is all good, but when we do not have the funding for that provided, and we do not have any class size parameters being used based off of scenario 1, it is very concerning, especially as teaching a class with 36 students on average.
Okay, so that's what you have been before. So some of the things that you mentioned that you were concerned about, they did say they addressed those, the staggered breaks and those things. The PPE, I'm trying to figure out what is your main concern, what you didn't hear yesterday from the minister that you really wanted to hear that you didn't.
They mentioned that we're going to have hand sanitizers in the classrooms, and the cleaning will be increased, and more custodial staff will be present, and that's all great. But how does hand sanitizers stop an airborne virus? Not having mandatory masks in a classroom, making it an option, is just going to lead to eventually rises in COVID cases, especially, like I said, when they're not limiting class size limits at all in scenario 1. And again, there is no way that we can follow Dr. Hinshaw's recommendations with physical distancing of 2 meters within the class. Especially, like I said, a lot of our classes are pretty small, and we have huge class sizes, with more students actually enrolled this year than last year.
You mentioned the issue of masks. We just had a poll this week that the Leger company did that found that most parents in Canada, the majority of respondents anyway, do want their kids to wear masks at least part of the time. Where do you fall on that, whether they should be wearing and you should be wearing, and whether you could even get students and kids to wear masks?
And that's a huge, as a teacher, I am going to be wearing my mask myself because I want to protect my students. I want to protect those I come in contact with. And I feel that it should be mandated that we wear masks just because, again, we're dealing with an airborne virus. And I know that many, again, majority, same with parents, they are on that same page. However, it is going to be difficult to enforce it at the same time. As a high school teacher, teaching high school students, you can, it's sometimes they don't follow other protocols. Like, you're not going to get every student to follow. It just is what it is. And when we talk about elementary age students, it's going to be even more difficult. So having also those class size limits and being able to physically distance is also very key here. And that is the biggest issue for me with the scenario one, is there is no parameters for that. There is no plan for that.
So you're about 6 weeks away from a return now. What would it take for the province to win your confidence? What would a safe return to the classroom look like for you?
Again, a safe return would be that they have set safety precautions in place, that they have provided staff, parents and students with the proper protective equipment, that they have limited the class sizes, that if in-person classes is the focus, maybe going with scenario two, making it less of a complete in-person experience and making it more a slower process, so that we can see how we respond to the situation with COVID, since COVID numbers are rising in Alberta. And so not going from completely online to now fully in person, having maybe a slower return to classes with, again, the proper safety protocols in place, and limiting our class size limits. But again, it all comes down to funding, and the funding is not there for this. And we, per student, we are down in Edmonton Public especially about 6% per student in funding overall. So we don't have that funding right now to deal with a lot of the COVID, let alone have enough staff to be also teaching these students at the same time.
So as I listen to that, I mean, a lot of things obviously unanswered, unclear for you at this point. We did hear from the minister again saying, if we look at the numbers, we look at the situation and it's not optimal, we're going to assess our plan and we'll look at scenario 2 and 3 and more restrictive if the reality changes. But I'm just wondering, I mean, how are you even going to concentrate on teaching, on content and courses and your students with all of this going on?
Honestly, like, we know, and we know science, there's research on this. Everyone knows that students, when they are in a high stress and anxious situation, they don't learn. It is going to be a barrier for their learning. And at this point, like, my biggest concern is for their safety. Again, for other teachers, when I talk to other teachers, that again, their concern is not that they also have families, that they also have immunocompromised people in their lives, and not knowing if you're bringing something home with you is terrifying. And it's going to be also terrifying for our students, and our students need the support, and we need the government to support us by providing that, again, proper safety protocol, providing us funding for that, so that we can protect our students and our families and those in the greater community. And I just wanted to point out, Heather, when you mentioned about cohorts for the high schools, it is difficult as a high school teacher to have high school students only be within with a certain group. Socializing is 95% of their high school experience. Going from one class to another with a different teacher is going to be very difficult to form a cohort. And as well as working in a school that has a lot of families with that have low income, a lot of them take public transit. So having them be cohort in the school is not really going to work outside of that school.
That's interesting, because they mentioned assigned seating on buses, but that's school buses. That's not public transit to get to school as well. Rajwa, let's keep in touch. 6 weeks for the province to get things set and for Alberta to flatten its curve. Numbers going up, as we've been talking about, but let's have another conversation as that start date gets a little bit closer to see how things are progressing. Thanks for this morning. I appreciate your being on with us today.
Yeah, no problem. Take care.
You too. Rajwa Shibley from Edmonton this morning.